We return.
Oh, hi, Spaz.
Oh, hi, Stevo. How's your sex life?
I'm tired. I'm wasted. You're a good friend. Anyway. I am tired and wasted.
But luckily, we're at the home stretch.
But the show must Torimaru on.
Alrighty.
And we got, 5 pages left? Or 6, or whatever.
Yes.
That. So, let's go on. Who's popcorned?
Well, I'll popcorn to you, but first, and let's see, in the silent forest, between the make-believe trees, in a cottage cheese cottage, lives Albie, the racist dragon. Part 6. And so, Albie ran away into a very dark and very scary cave, and it was so dark and so scary that he began to cry dragon tears, which, as we all know, turned into jelly beans. Wait, wrong story. In the silent forest, the fallen autumnal leaves crunch beneath his black sneakers with every step, stripping the wood of its dense still. With the morning sun just rising in the east, a chilly but calm wind leaves between the entwined maze of bare branches above. It blows past him. He shivers. He mutters to himself. A memory surfaces. This is fall, right?
Yeah, I may not be the biggest expert on amnesia, but this doesn't make you that much of a moron. Or maybe it's because he's from Los Angeles and isn't familiar with the temperate climate. Because, it's subtropical in Los Angeles, if not full-on tropical. Yeah, Los Angeles is magical like that. Sorry, I'm not gonna put down that Los Angeles thing.
Brought to you by Los Angeles Marshmallow Cereal.
I had to. I had to trigger that. But, so now is a perfect time for the Aki sisters to come up and, shank him or something, right?
Hopefully.
They're gonna mug him. Cause they don't get enough recognition and therefore enough money. They're gonna extort faith out of him. Are you still reading?
Oh, popcorn to you.
The changing color of emerald leaves to shades of red and brown, chilly winds, the crisp morning air. All these emerge from simplicity and happiness. He stopped walking and put his hands behind his head, taking a deep breath of the air and the smells of all the forest. The smell of the wood with pointed branches, the falling reds and oranges, even the wet and clumped leaves took on a sweet sense. Wait. Is he in a pine forest?
I believe so.
Maybe it's a magical pine forest.
It's a pine forest of leaves.
Yeah, because I just realized, if he's in a pine forest, why are there leaves? Because pine is evergreen,
Well, technically speaking, pine needles are leaves, but this isn't.
Like I said, evergreen.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm just so confused about the botany of Gensokyo right now.
let me double check the red pine real quick. Yeah, just because it's called a red pine doesn't mean that it's going to be red.
Okay, yeah. We need to call Zune and help us clarify the botany again, Sokyo. Even though we played Mountain of Faith and POF.
Clearly it's full of extinct lepidendrons.
What's that?
It's a Carboniferous period era, basically moss on steroids.
Alright, let's see.
A lot of steroids.
Exhaling, he said, "What is winter like, I wonder?"
Last I checked, cold weather, occasionally snow. Again, if you're this messed up, I don't think Reimu should have let you walk alone. Also, we have our main character admiring nature scene. Typical of every other Gappy fic we did. Like, holy crap, I'm in nature. I didn't know this existed. I thought the world was covered in buildings and trees and carbon monoxide.
You should be
Now that I
careful.
think about it, it is pretty sad that these Gappy writers probably have little, if any, exposure to nature. Probably outside of like a park or something. And they don't know about like what it's like to stay in a forest or to go out camping or something like that.
Mosquitoes, smelly bathroom use.
Dude, shitting in the woods is actually pretty awesome.
Yes, but the fact that anyone can come up or a bear could catch you in the business.
Man,
Where I live, we don't have bears.
I've done my share of shitting in the woods, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's almost as fun as pissing in the woods. But
Good, I remember that.
anyway,
But yeah, it seems like the motives people use to have to writing these things is because they lack something in their life and they're trying to fill a hole rather than actually trying to do something about it.
Pretty much.
but yeah, it actually, now that I think about it, it is sad that these people aren't exposed to nature, and it's not like, oh, it's winter, it's snowing, it's for them it's like, oh, it's so magical. For me, it's January.
Change your life. Piss in the woods.
Yeah, change your life, shit in the woods, live a little. But also, which leads me to say, well, the mamas and the papas can't tell fall from winter, so what makes me think any Californian can? Really, have you heard the song?
All the leaves are brown, and the sky is gray, and the sky is gray. I forgot the words, and what they say, or what they say.
The next lyric is, I went for a walk on a winter's day, even though from what they describe, it's obviously fall.
Oh, yes. Let's see. Actually, no. In fall, the leaves are red. In winter, in Texas, a very similar climate, the leaves are brown.
Okay. But wait, if it's a similar climate, then, oh, whatever.
Alright, here the leaves should be brown, and
Go
the sky
choke
should be
on a
gray.
ham sandwich.
The best way for me to say that is Haru Midori Aka Haru Midori Aki Aka.
The Aki sisters.
I think you shouldn't think it's like,
Anyway,
beautiful
so-
in that forest.
That's another way to
Why?
prevent yourself from writing crappy fan fiction. Go the hell outside.
It worked for Walden, it will work for you. I mean, it worked for the guy who wrote Walden, sorry.
Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Ralph Waldo Emerson, sorry. It worked in Walden. Alright, I'm not drunk,
Anyway.
I've been drinking water.
You're drunk on water. Let's see,
Frothy
this-
mugs
this-
of water.
The snap of a tree branch broke the repose, and the boy's head, too, snapped to his left towards the unsettling sound. He could feel his own heartbeat. What?
They say he snapped his neck. Great, he's dead now. We don't have to read it anymore.
He could feel his own heartbeat as his ears and mind hastily assessed what just happened. Was it an animal? A shrew? Squirrel? Maybe even a fox? Come on, Ron. He jumped again when he heard the sound of crushing
I
leaves. These sounds were far off, but the boy could tell that they were getting closer. He started to hastily walk away, but as heard yet another snap, he started to run. What is this thing? He vaults over a fallen tree and keeps on running. He saw a root and moved around it, but it somehow still managed to trip over something. Hitting the ground, the boy grunts, present tense, through the pain, but the adrenaline running through his body brought him back up and running. He turned around a tree to try to lose his pursuer, but ended up being blinded by the sun. In between the sounds of crunching leaves, the boy thought he heard someone laughing. This laughing however, was somewhat muffled. He didn't pay much attention to this, but the sound grew much louder all of a sudden, and for a second, through the glare of the sun, the boy thought he saw a figure walk in front of him from behind a tree. Sasquatch?
Sasquatch.
First thing that comes to mind.
That yokai needs... Oh my god, if that yokai could be in Urban Legend and Limbo, that would be amazing.
Sasquatch? Official... Flying woolly Sasquatch. Zoom, do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Get on it.
Yes, we must do it.
Don't forget her twin sister, the Flying Yeti.
So, okay, I guess.
Too late. The boy collided with the short figure and his body spun midair.
Oh, Stevo, guys, how much you're betting this is gonna... What?
Too late, the boy collided with the short figure and his body spun midair, crashing on the ground with his back. What the? He started.
So?
Yeah, is that so? Actually, it isn't. You'll find out. What the? He started before another weight fell onto his chest. The wind was knocked out of him and his body was painfully sore. Popcorn.
After his vision cleared, he noticed that the weight on top of him was the short figure he slammed into. It was a very small girl with what appeared to be semi-transparent wings. Or... Wait.
What?
Alright. Her apparel consisted of a white one-piece skirt with a black frill. On her head, she wore a white mob cap with black ribbons, and her curly hair was a silvery blonde. The boy was very confused, but before he could get up, she stirred and lifted her head. Her eyes were a shocking shade red-orange.
Sorry, but the way you said "get up."
I think it was intentional.
Laughing is contagious.
My.
Okay, go on.
I find it that funny. Laughing is contagious.
Hey, this is every day for the faceless male protagonist guy.
Except he's on.
But this guy does have a face with a slanted nose and blue eyes, remember?
Which means he's not going to get laid.
Aww.
What a
Hey,
shame.
Spaztique, that's usual for him.
Let's see. It only to the boy a few seconds, exact words, that he somehow saved the girl from being stuck in the mud, but their faces were now uncomfortably close to each other, and that he had no idea how to react.
Turns out this story is different. His waifu isn't racing. It's Luna Child. See? Night and day difference. Moon and other moon difference. Then again, considering how he defied our predictions before, this might be just an accidental thing, never
What's
meaning to
funny?
imply any romance.
What's funny is that the most famous but somehow successful Gappy story, which was actually a deconstruction of it, actually it did involve one of the central characters being named Moonchild.
No, wait, I'm thinking Star Child, which is like an avatar of the Emperor.
No, the name was Moonchild.
Alright.
We're talking never-ending story here, but moving back to this. After a couple of moments, he worked up his courage, past tense. Hello, he blurts out, present tense. Hi, she replies in a shy tone.
Well, forget what I said about any doubts of it being accidental, because they're definitely gonna fuck now.
It's at that point she realizes the situation when her face goes red and she immediately jumps off him. Ah, she exclaims, I'm sorry, mission abort! And with that, the other two little people with wings pop out from behind the higher tree branches and fly away. They just flew away.
Oh.
This leaves a couple of questions to be answered. First, if you just ran into the three mischievous fairies, and wouldn't, Luna Child be able to mask their sounds of walking in the leaves in the first place? Her ability is to mute sound, And second, you just gave us a story rule in that these inhabitants can fly. So why would they be walking through the leaves at all if they're trying to take the stealthy approach? And yes, I know fairies aren't that bright, but even the three mischievous fairies have some level of cohesion. I have read all of Oriental Sacred Place and Bright Nature Deity.
I just realized that this is the same, like, this whole why can't this guy fly thing is the same, like, plot hole as in Nuki. Do y'all know about Nuki?
No.
I haven't seen it myself, but I heard a lot of bad things about it. It's pretty much an E.T. ripoff that takes place in South Africa.
Oh, right now.
And America saves the day.
And by the way, it's not District 9. So,
District 9. Sure, no joke.
No, but District 9 was actually somewhat good. It actually dealt with something called racism.
District 9 was a masterpiece. Okay, moving on.
Alright. He gets up slowly and brushes off the mud from his clothes that he can reach. He very calmly pulls himself together and gets back on the path, walking towards the still rising sun. I guess this is normal. And all that happened was basically the guy ran into the 3 mischievous fairies and nothing came of it. Popcorn.
Oh, by the way, I just noticed that the first time he saw people, like, fly just by floating in the air, and he's like, nah. Like, he's someone from the Monday world. If I saw stuff like that, even after being gapped against Sokyo and after seeing, like, a red demon and a cosplayer,
You will,
seeing people fly, I would lose my shit. But he's like, I guess this is normal.
Or you'll shit so many bricks
To
to be
quote
able to
Hi,
build a
Daisy,
house.
after a while, you just stop asking these questions.
Though I swear,
But what is the point?
if I ever make a live action Ditter, that's one of my dreams right there. If I could just do that, I would have the very first scene where Broly Diamondback or whoever, like, well, I'm hoping to get Broly Diamondback as a character doing this. The first time he goes outside and sees the Gensokyo XP, he loses his shit. Just a solid minute of him just totally in utter awe looking at this utterly insane fantasy world.
Anyway, after some time, about 10 minutes or so, the path became cleaner and developed into a stony road. The road was paved with round gray limestones that poked out of the sea as sandy-colored mortar. The trees started to distance themselves as he found himself in a tiny outcropping. To the side of the road, the boy noted, was what looked to be a small peddler store. Maybe someone inside knows a thing or two about directions. And so he opened the store's door and entered into the most bizarre store he had ever seen, and that is all we have so far. Let's see.
Whose store?
It's probably Corindo.
Most likely.
But let's see. Do we have any more?
I'm surprised this guy knows what limestone is.
Well, the guy is
Nope,
a decent
that's-
prose writer, remember? But we're about to get to our final thoughts.
But yeah, that's all we have so far. That's all he wrote. All right, with all these Gappy stew fics claiming to be being the same and claiming to be different, I'd like to reveal a way you can actually make your Gappy fic different. How about, instead of your OC being teleported into Gensokyo from the outside, you can have them be born, raised, and living all in Gensokyo. That way you don't have to write a beginning where they're gapped or spirited away or farted into Gensokyo or whatever you want to call it. You don't need to explain why anyone would want to import him into Gensokyo, and best of all, you don't have to explain how he was immersed into the Gensokyo culture and ecosystem. Questions aren't raised, because actually that would be like asking a German how he became such a beer enthusiast. That's a lot of backstory explained, or at least left unquestioned, and you can go straight into the story much more easily. And that's pretty much the big thing. More observant listeners would notice what I described as a native Gensokian OC, not a Gappy. The point I'm making is that, and the same point I've been making ever since I started riffing with Spaz, is that the story pitch of a Gappy or anyone being imported into Gensokyo is dead on arrival, because you have so much you have to explain about them just going into Gensokyo. I mean, it's worse than crossing the Rio Grande.
What about a story about some random Japanese guy that, went through one of the fluctuations, and it's his story of how he escaped?
I'm about to get to that, actually.
Escape from Gensokyo. Or someone tried to cross the Rio Grande and instead got gapped into Mexico. Another shameless self-promotion. For those out of the loop, I made a series of really crazy comics called Wehiko, and Wehiko is pretty much like a Mexican Gensokyo. And I pretty much use that to make all sorts of Spanish puns. Like my first one is Baca Nueve, and the second one was...
Is that Cherno joke?
Yeah.
Why am I just imagining everyone got eaten by chupacabras?
There's a chupacabra in Gensokyo.
Oh, Shingo in the
it's
chat
called
says,
Chupai.
leave my country out of this, Stevo.
Oh yeah, Chupai.
Don't make fun
Wehiko annexes Gensokyo.
Don't get back. If you're, be careful, Stevo, or else the Oni will beat you up like Lubarijay's.
Oh man, too bad. I don't think Remy's gonna be in Urban Legend in Limbo because she has a freaking chupacabra.
But anyway, guys, really, aspiring writers, aspiring fic writers, or aspiring writers in general, stop writing Gappy fics. Really, guys, just stop. I know it's fun to riff, but I like to riff other things,
Alright, I'll just burn this pile I have next to me then.
At least go read Never-Ending Story if you're gonna...
Sorry.
Anyway, that's all I want to say right now. Spaztique, go on with your 3 pages of stuff.
Alright, I'll go through it as fast as I can. Inversely, if you are going to make an outsider fic, and there's absolutely nothing we can do to make you make a native OC fic, which I will admit make up many of the better fics, like Crystal Great Swords Call the Moon, or vanilla fics. Oh, don't forget Minnie from Wicked and Swords Girl, or there's a ton out there. Or many of the vanilla fics, which are my personal favorite, then here's my advice. If you absolutely must make an outsider fic, tell a good one. You better make damn sure you understand story structure, the flow of exposition, decent prose, character dynamics, and beyond, which I'll be talking at Acon on June 6th. And hopefully I'll be getting a special guest to also explain this stuff if I can scrounge up the schedule and the budget for it. I'll announce that once I actually do that, though. Otherwise, you're doing 2 things by writing these fics. 1, you're giving the Toho fanfiction community a bad name. There's a reason why Sonic fics, Harry Potter fics, Doctor Who fics, and Star Trek fics are infamous among the fanfiction world. It's because many of them try to fit they fit an archetypical OC plot mold. In Harry Potter fics, there's the transfer student. Doctor Who, someone becomes the new companion, and they have even more, they don't understand that although the doctors are experts at what they do, they confuse them for Marty Stews, and they're like, well, I have better powers than the doctor. I'm the other last of the Time Lords. Or in Star Trek, they get the new officer who's better than Captain Kirk or Picard or whoever there is. Or in the Sonic fics, those need very little explanation. I have all the Chaos Emeralds, and I got all these super magical powers, and let's see, who's Edgy the Hedgehog, was it? Or...
Shadow.
No, it's not Shadow. There was another thing. Dark Rust, or the one that says, yeah, nothing personnel, kid. That one. It involves freaking fighting Hitler, and there's no way to describe it, but...
What the fuck?
I'll grow up to be purple and despise me forever.
Yes, that's it.
Are you?
Who's that guy?
Darkbat the Hedgehog.
Cold Steel the Hedgehog.
Cold Steel the Hedgehog. Yes, there you go. Nothing personnel, kid. But there's a reason these series are infamous. They have this archetypical OC mold that writers try to keep doing, Stevo and I have spent literally years warning newcomers about these molds, and we do the Gensokyo, the Toho mold. And yet more people seem to want to do this impossible challenge to be different, which leads me to my next one. By making these fics, you encourage people to try to beat the formula using the formula itself. The Gappy cycle runs like this. Writer creates the Gappy fic angers longtime Toho fans, writer gives up and the fic dies, the next writer tries to take their place and says, I will be different. Writer continues to make the same mistakes and the cycle continues again and again. In fact, this is the same paradox I saw coming into Ditter. I was making a fic to tear down and expose the savage, selfish core of these kinds of fics, but I also knew that plenty of people out there were going to copy them verbatim. So if you want to make a decent outsider fic and not a Gappy fic, an outsider fic, and I'm about to tell you the true differences. Also, the actual Broly Diamondback is here. Welcome. We're about to go into the final notes on this fanfic ref. First, don't write an outsider fic until... This is actually a copy-paste from my Making of Ditter guide, but it bears repeating. Here are the guidelines if you want to make a decent outsider fic. 1. Don't write an outsider fic until you've competently written a vanilla fic or an original story. Until you get solid, detailed reviews, go back to the drawing boards until you master plot, settings, character, genre, and theme. Next, only bring your outsider into Gensokyo if it's for a damn good reason. Otherwise, start your character there. People pick Yukari or Gaps or whatever because it's the easiest way to get into Gensokyo, but you have to remember, the self-insert is not you. You can start anywhere. You can already be a resident of Gensokyo, and you can build a neat little backstory of how you grew up in that fantasy world, but we don't necessarily have to see the backstory. The story is what matters. If you're already living in Japan, as was mentioned earlier, you can wander into Gensokyo by accident. Otherwise, if you're starting from the outside world, have a damn good reason to go. I'll even give you some ideas. Mercenaries from another fantasy world want to earn a quick buck by taking a job in Gensokyo, and then they get into deep shit when their job goes awry or something. Or, former mage returns to Gensokyo to connect with his or her family, and then has to struggle with a dilemma of, do they want to stay in Gensokyo or go back to the outside world? And chances are it's more dangerous in Gensokyo, but they have like a more boring life in the outside world. They have to choose between the lesser of two evils or the better of two goods. Or, let's see, what else? A person legitimately goes to Gensokyo and really wants to learn magic, but then they find out it's really hard and everyone's like, oh, just give up and go home, but they don't want to give up. I'm sure you guys can think of many, many more.
Oh, Spaz, I'd like to chime in. Notice that in Ditter, he wasn't just pulled in against his will by Yukari, He does what actually happens with Gappy writers, that Broly was seduced into Gensokyo.
Yes, that's another option. Character gets drawn into Gensokyo.
How about I just had a thought.
Or like I said, a tip I would give to the writers. Honestly, read the Never-Ending Story novel, not the movies. The novel, because it is a deconstruction and is actually a good outsider fic, and yes, it is in Gensokyo before Toho existed, because Fantastica literally translates to Gensokyo.
I'm gonna watch the Never-Ending Story 3 because Jack Black's in it.
Oh God!
No.
And it involves the nasty.
The nasty.
The nasty.
And the Rockbiter sings freaking Steppenwolf.
Sued because of that shit.
What's a nasty?
You don't want to know.
Anyway,
All
I
right.
had a thought.
But moving on. 3. Focus on a tiny cast. Set your story in a small, noble world, in the words of Robert McKee, and stick to it. If your story is set in the Scarlet Devil Mansion, it will stay in the Scarlet Devil Mansion. If your story takes place at the Hakare Shrine, it is going to stay at the Hakare Shrine. And you might say, oh, but I want to explore Gensokyo. I want to have the entire cast. Here's the problem. If you include every single Toho character, do not be surprised when people call out your characters as shallow and one-dimensional, because there's not enough time to focus on anyone but your OC. In fact, in a lot of the reviews that utterly miss the point of Ditter, they're like, oh, we never get to see any of the Toho cast. Everyone comes off as one-dimensional because we never get to see them. Oh, really? That's about as insightful as saying that the heroes in Watchmen weren't very heroic, or that the magical girl deal in Madoka didn't seem very fair. No, it's if you have a giant cast, it becomes increasingly harder to really get engaged in the rest of that cast. 4, focus on a specific goal.
Can I?
Yes?
Can I talk first? It's reminding me, like, faceless hentai protagonist. That's like making a hentai doujin focused around said faceless hentai protagonist.
Yes! Yes!
You focus on his ass instead of, like, focusing on the Toho character that you want to screw.
Holy crap!
Another thing. If you want to explore Gensokyo, go into Toho Craft or something.
I think that is one hell of an insight. Stories with the faceless male protagonist focus more on the Toho characters, albeit a little bit too much, than the typical Western OC-driven fanfic. But the lesson we learn is, we don't... imagine a doujin fic where we're just focused on the guy screwing the Toho characters, and not the Toho characters getting screwed by the faceless male protagonist.
Oh, God.
That's food for thought right there.
Yeah, it is.
God, he needs to lose weight.
It makes me think of that one guy who's like...
I don't know.
the worst.
Luca from Monster Girl Quest has a fan base.
Ooh my.
And speaking of specific goals, focus on a specific goal. Even the faceless male protagonist has a specific goal. To further the species.
To spread his family name across the country.
Unless you're in that, unless he's in that one series by Hammer in which everybody's abusing him, and that's just to get absolutely beaten the crap out of.
He's out.
But anyway, the writer of this series wants to get better with story structure, so here's quite possibly one of the easiest ones to work with. It's a model of how people transform their behaviors. It's known as the Truby model. Also, it's named after John Truby, writer of the book The Anatomy of Story. Brendan, if you're watching this, I will repeat The Anatomy of Story by John Truby, Truby. And it's a 7-step structure. First, your character has a weakness that affects other people and a need to overcome that weakness. The weakness is ruining their life and they need something to change it. For example, in a number of tragedies, and of course in a number of comedies, you have a character whose weakness is hubris. Their pride gets them into a lot of trouble. Like in Tootsie, you have, I think it was Dennis Hoffman's character who was like a really asshole actor guy who wanted to get gigs, but he was like all prideful and jerkish. And his need was to be more humble, to know his limits, and so on, to be a kinder person. Second, your character has a desire that goes against this weakness. It's the goal of the story, and a problem, which is the thing that gets in the way of that goal. For example, going back to the Tootsie example, the guy wants a top-notch acting gig on a soap opera, but the problem is he's gotten kicked out of every available studio there is. And, of course, there are opponents. You have your external opponents, which are like society, weather, time, destiny, fate, money, that kind of stuff. The external stuff that gets in the way. You have the interpersonal opponents, friends, enemies, contacts, colleagues, other people. And lastly, and most powerfully, is the internal opponents, the main character's own feelings, their negative thoughts, their behaviors, their habits, and, of course, the weakness. Now, based on the weakness, the character is going to develop some sort of faulty plan to overcome the problem and opponents to achieve their desire. If anyone's seen Tootsie, you'll notice there's a woman on the poster, but that's actually a man baby because he decides to dress as a woman to go incognito to fuel his desire to be a star. And he thinks that, oh, this is gonna be awesome, but of course, the plan may work out at first, and it's always funny seeing the protagonist do all this crazy shit, but eventually the plan starts to fail in the 5th phase of the structure known as the battle. in which we see where the character's weakness overtakes them. Like their pride really is getting in the way, and they realize, okay, maybe I need to start changing. And eventually, it becomes so bad they have a self-revelation. Part 6, the self-revelation where they realize, okay, I have this weakness, and I need to overcome it with these traits. So after that, they're able to... At first, it doesn't seem like it's going to work. Like, let's see, another example, Ghostbusters is another one. Let's see, the weakness of these characters is they don't take anything seriously. They're all a bunch of goofballs. And their need is they need to actually start doing their jobs right. At the beginning of Ghostbusters, they all got fired even after discovering the existence of ghosts. And then, like, okay, well, let's make like a ghost hunting thing, like an extermination business. And then they get into the rundown firehouse, and it's like, this place should be condemned. And then Dan Aykroyd's character's like, did you see this pole? We're moving in tonight. And of course, they have the opponents, the external opponents, the ghosts. They have the interpersonal opponents, Walter Peck trying to shut them down. And the internal opponents, in that they all don't know what they're doing. They got all this dangerous equipment. It's like, oh, I'm not worried. It's not like you carry around an unlicensed nuclear accelerator on your back every day. And of course, they plan to make money off this, but of course, the battle is Walter Peck tries to shut them down, causes a huge explosion, the apocalypse is coming on. And they have the self-revelation where it's like, okay, now we have to save society. They get support from the mayor, they bring in the military, and of course, at first it doesn't work, like all self-revelations. You change your behavior, it doesn't seem like it works at first. But of course, in Tootsie, the guy ends up like getting with the girl and like coming out and revealing everything. It seems improvised like, let's see. I'm tripping over my words. But basically, after the self-revelation, you have the new equilibrium, where after the characters finally change their behavior, now we see that life will never be the same for these characters because they overcame their weakness and now they got their desire, or they may have changed their desire because they realized their previous desire wasn't working for them. So, in short, that is weakness and need, then it's desire and problem, your opponents, external, interpersonal, and internal, plan, based on the weakness, to get the desire and beat the opponents, battle, where the weakness overcomes the main character, self-revelation, where they realize their weakness and decide to adopt the need, new equilibrium, where the character has changed and life will never be the same again. Now, out of all the structures I've seen, this is probably the hardest to mess up because it mimics how human beings change their behavior. But as I said before, story structure runs on the Gigo principle. Garbage in, garbage out. Let's see, what time are we at? 37 minutes. I'm going to speed this up. Next, flesh out your characters and relationships. Rainbow and the Fairies were basically cardboard cutouts for the protagonist to look at. When you write your characters, think as they think, see as they see. Don't have them just baby the protagonist to progress the plot. Think context first, words second. Whenever I write dialogue, I think, what is my character thinking and what do they want? Then I make the words to make it make sense. And also, character relationships. If they're strangers, treat them like strangers. And lastly, and most importantly, darker is not better. Even if all the dark stuff that I write, I love contrasting with idealistic stuff. I love adventure, romance, swashbuckling, action scenes, high explosives, and fast chases. Toho is a fantasy comedy series. It's what got me into Toho. I'm a comedy writer. I love comedy. And Toho is fertile ground for wacky fantasy hijinks. Even in the games, the adventures are still peppered with goofy plots, with witty dialogue and exciting boss battles.
And swearing.
What was that?
I said, and the occasional swearing.
Alright. See, and I know it doesn't help
that's
that
what
there's...
makes it darker and edgier. Sorry, no, that's what makes it darker and edgier. Where's that damn fourth chaos emerald?
Yes. And I know it doesn't help that there's some big dark fics out there, like Usually Dead's fics gotten some publicity, Imperfect Metamorphosis, Koishi's Heart-Throbbing Adventure, and of course Ditter, but come on, lighthearted fics can be just as good. There's Fantasy of Utter Ridiculousness by Curtis Wildcat, which involves Toho and Mega's XLR, and Suika, so you can pretty much tell where that goes. Giant robots versus Suika. We got Rokenkan's Dolphin Rider Koishi, which reimagines Toho as a Magical Girl series. You have the entire output of Iced Fairy, which can be very inspirational. Hell, go to the Maidens of the Kaleidoscope forums, go to their fanfic forums, and read anything categorized as comedy or action, and you will find tons of great stuff. Just because you may have noticed dark fics getting publicity doesn't mean there aren't great normal fics out there. But again, if you wish to violate the above guidelines, then I will echo what Stevo said and tell you to just stop. I'll gladly take this challenge if you want. Alginef is doing what Ice Fairy, Ice Fairy had a sort of a challenge where you have a quota for your fanfics. And I'm planning on joining that. And I'm likely to, one of my plans is to finish Flight of the Steel Butterfly, but I always write that, my plan is to write that project when I'm tired, so I don't really invest too much into it, but even then, I want to show that there are more than one ways to do the Gappy cycle. But otherwise, if you're going to try to be different, well, we're just going to have more cannon fodder for our next riff.
Let's see. That's something else about being different. If you want to be different, you gotta, not just do it a little, being different is not making an excuse to be the same. It's about actually looking at something and saying, no, I'm gonna do this instead.
Yes.
And if you want to be different, you gotta be staggeringly different. One of the examples I'm doing, I'm writing a part on being different, and one of the examples I did was every other sitcom dad out there, every other one, versus Homer Simpson. And basically, every sitcom dad, sure, they have their vices, but they're overall good people, and they're loving fathers, and they're lighthearted, happy-go-lucky men, and they may be opinionated, but they aren't assholes. Stuff like that. They have simple pleasures. The comedy dad part of the family sitcom template. You know about that, right?
Yes.
And then there's Homer Simpson. He's an alcoholic. He's a fat ass. He's an abusive parent. He's lazy. He's incompetent. And, of course, sitcom dads, sure, they may not be an expert on stuff, but they mean well, and they at least know a thing or two. Homer Simpson is just an idiot. And that's what makes Homer Simpson different, is that he is very different. He's not just different in, one or two aspects. He is overwhelmingly different. He is completely different. He makes you go, well, now for something completely different.
And that's why we
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And funny enough, he was so different that other people tried to copy him. And, let's see, but everything else paled in comparison. In fact, another example, speaking of sitcoms, is Seinfeld. Back when Seinfeld originally came out, there's even there's a trope called Seinfeld is unfunny, but not a lot of people know the context that Seinfeld originally came out at a time when every sitcom on TV was always about variations of the typical sitcom family with the non-Homer Simpson example. There's always the dad who knows it all, the well-meaning but emotional mom, the cute daughter, the rebellious son, and all the sitcoms back then are I will be different. And then it's the well-meaning dad, the emotional mom, the cute daughter, and the rebellious son. Then another sitcom was I will be different. And this time it's you get the Cosby Show. And this time it's just a black know-it-all father, a black emotional mother, a black cute daughter, and a black rebellious son or whatever. You name these. It's it dates back a long, long time. And then
all the
came
way back
Seinfeld.
To the honeymooners.
Seinfeld came.
The family sitcom template dates all the way back to the honeymooners, and that's probably why you'll hear nerds of a different persuasion say every family sitcom is a ripoff of the honeymooners, because the honeymooners was the first to do that.
Yep.
And we're talking like back in black and white. You probably heard like
50s.
like the sitcom dad say, "We're going to the moon." That is a direct parody of the Honeymooners. Like not just like using the template, but a straight up parody and homage to that.
Yep. But then came Seinfeld, which said, you know what? We really will be different. There's not going to be a cute kid. There's going to be no kids. It's just going to be a bunch of 20-something adults, single adults, not living in some beautiful house in suburbia, living in the middle of downtown, in the middle of the city. There's not going to be some big moral message at the end. These guys are going to fuck up and stay fucked up. There's not going to be a happy ending. The series freaking ends with the characters in jail talking about shirt buttons. When people copy the previous thing to quote-unquote be different, here's what it's like. Imagine somebody decides to ram their car into a brick wall. And someone else says, you know what, I'm not going to do that, I'll be different. So they ram a sedan into a brick wall. Then someone else says, I'll be different. Then they ram a van into a brick wall. I'll be different. They ram a limousine into a brick wall. And they keep ramming these different cars into the wall over and over again until finally someone comes along and says, no, I will seriously fucking be different. And they take the car, it can even look like the other cars, but then they turn the fuck around and get away from the brick wall.
And then drive to the lake.
So when you try to make a Gappy fic by repeating the same cliches, that's like ramming a different colored car into the same brick wall that the other 50,000 cars have rammed into.
Well, okay, that's like the fourth How Not to Write a Novel reference that we made. So I should drop one more recommendation is, if there's one thing every aspiring writer should read, it's How Not to Write a Novel.
Yes, please.
And yes, that car running into a brick wall, that is a How Not to Write a Novel reference, right?
Actually, it was unintended, but now that you mention it, that is a classic line. In fact, let's see. I think I still have...
no right on... Like, we don't make rules, we make observations. No right on red is a rule. Driving straight into a brick wall is a bad idea, is an observation.
Yep. Let's see. Do not think of us as traffic cops or even driving instructors. Instead, think of us as your onboard navigation system, available day or night, a friendly voice to turn to whenever you look up, lost and afraid, and think, how the fuck did I end up here?
You know, that would be funny. A GPS with a Stevo or Spaz voice.
We should fund it.
Of course, I would be saying the compass directions instead of right and left.
Yeah, right and left.
And apparently everyone gets mad when I do that. It's like, what do you mean by east? It's like, I mean east, as in towards the arch, as in towards the rising sun.
Anyway, I think I'm going to put some recommended books in the bottom of this. So far we have The Anatomy of Story by John Truby, and our old classic, How Not to Write a Novel by Howard Mittlemark and Sandra Newman. And with that,
I can't really...
And with that, Brendan, I wish you luck.
And I think we're done. Oh, yeah, one more is On Writing by Stephen King.
Ah, yes. And with that, we hope you guys have all learned something and got a couple of laughs out of this. And we'll see you on the next Spaz and Stevo riff with Spaztique
and Stevo.
Signing off.
Aw.
And I completely missed almost all of it because I had